Assalamu alaikum. You're watching Views and News, and I'm Faisal Rahman live from our Islamabad studios. Today, we'll be talking about the Indian ceasefire violations all along the line of control. Today, a young man who was just 33 years old was shot by the Indian sniper. Now they have started using the sniper rifles to target the individuals, and this is a very, very unfortunate incident. I mean, earlier we used to hear that they are firing all along the line of control, and they're using mortars, and other than that 155 guns also were being used. But now the snipers have started targeting the civilian population, and now this is something which is very, very concerning. Pakistan has raised this issue with the Indian High Commission also, but again, as we know that the Indians will not stop. This is what they are up to. This is what exactly their establishment wants, to keep on engaging Pakistan through the LOC violations. And if you just look at the figures, I'm talking about almost 10.5 months of LOC violations. You will end up noticing that 2,700 violations were carried out by the Indian Armed Forces all along the line of control. Just look at the number, 2,700 violations in 10.5 months. This is the actual situation on ground. To talk about this and to sort of also talk about the reaction of the Pakistani Foreign Office, we'll be talking to Lieutenant General retired Raza Muhammad Khan Saab. Raza Saab is going to join us on Skype, and we'll be also talking to Asif Durrani Saab, who's a senior ambassador and senior diplomat. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your participation in the program. If Durrani Saab, you allow me, let me put the first question to General Raza Muhammad Khan Saab. General Saab, earlier we have noticed that when we talk about the LOC violations, we normally end up hearing that the Indians are targeting the Pakistani civilian population through mortars, through 155 guns, and through other similar weapons as well. But this seems to be pretty new, that now they are targeting the civilians through their snipers. And today, a 33-year-old man was killed in such an activity. Your take, General Saab, on that?
Okay, Bismillah Rahman Rahim. I think this violation, rightful, as well as the previous violations, wherein civilians have targeted, whether is a patent willful killing of civilians, and I would terrorism.
General Saab, there is a slight problem. I can't hear you properly. Your voice is breaking up. So we'll try to take you again online, sir. Meanwhile, I'll talk to Ambassador Asif Durrani Saab. Durrani Saab, I hope you can hear me clearly, sir. Assalamu alaikum.
Yes, I can hear you. Assalamu alaikum.
Perfectly. Asif Durrani Saab, I hope you heard my earlier question, which I had put to General Raza Khan regarding the LOC violations, and now they have started targeting the civilian population through their snipers. Your take?
Well, I think this is not something new. They have been doing that in the past, and at least, as you said, and the Foreign Minister has also, in his letter to the Council President and the Secretary General of the UN, has also mentioned that over 2,700 violations have been done by the Indians along the line of control and the working boundary. And unfortunately, 25 of our soldiers and civilians have been martyred due to that, and over 200 are injured during this period. So this is not something new. And for us, the problem is that even if we have to retaliate, on the other side of the line of control, again, it's the Kashmiris, and we don't want to harm them. For the Indians, killing innocent people is not a serious matter. They have been doing that. So I think, but this has added gravity to the situation, seriousness to the situation, which is why I think Foreign Minister had to again remind the UN Security Council to play its role for which it was established. Yes.
All right. Now, another point is about the issue raised in the United Nations also. Uh, I was listening to one of our old colleague. He was talking to the special representative in United States of America, and this issue was raised there as well. And obviously, United Nations Security Council will look into the matter, because at the end of the day, Ambassador Sir, we all know it's all about the human rights violations, and especially targeting the civilians. And as you earlier mentioned, that Pakistan cannot retaliate the way we could have actually, because on the other side, they are Kashmiris, they are Muslims at the end of the day. So what sort of options are we left with, Ambassador Saab? I mean, we always, in fact, summon the High Commissioner or senior officials of the Indian High Commission, and we raise this issue time and time again, but nothing is happening. Isn't it? I mean, it seems as if it is a part of their agenda. They are all on the same page regarding this.
I think when you talk in the diplomatic terms, then it is a long haul. It is you will not get the results in a matter of days, weeks, months, or sometimes years. Now, Kashmir dispute is as old as the UN system itself, almost more than 7 decades. So, excuse me. So in that respect, what Pakistan has been doing through the peaceful means. India had imposed the wars on Pakistan, whether it was in 1965 or 1971, or if you talk about earlier in 1948 when the Indian troops landed in Srinagar, and that too with a dubious instrument of accession. So there has been a bad blood from the very beginning and subsequently, but it has got aggravated during the past 3 decades, and more so since last year on 5th of August, when the BJP-led government, they in fact absolutely, they annulled, they just swallowed, reoccupied the illegal state of Jammu and Kashmir, their illegal occupation. So in that, I think diplomatic options are to be exhausted. We have not yet exhausted those options. India is definitely on the defensive. They are in the world, wherever they go, Pakistan is chasing them. And whatever claims they make as being the largest democracy or being the champions of human rights, Pakistan shows them the mirror. And this is what precisely is happening, whether you say in the Western capitals or whether in the United Nations, this is being done. And now you can see a debate on human rights violations in Indian occupied Kashmir is much more comprehensive, is much more elaborate, and is its spectrum is quite wide than if, say, last year. Yes.
All right. General Raza Khan, I hope this time you can hear me clearly, sir. Am I audible?
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear. Can you hear me?
I can hear you perfectly fine, sir. Thank you. So your take on this very recent incident where a young 33-year-old Kashmiri on the Pakistani side of the border was brutally murdered, killed by the Indian sniper, sir.
Okay, as I was saying, whether it is this incident or the violation of the ceasefire line on the 14th of November or before that, the aim is to terrorize civilians, and therefore it is clearly an act of terrorism. And I think for this is also a war crime, and I will, now refer you to the Australian government, which actually have tried some of the members of the special forces who were found guilty of killing civilians, innocent civilians, and they had the moral courage to accept that yes, their forces have committed war crimes. So I think it is the Indian civil and military leadership which needs to be tried for war crimes. How this is going to happen? I think the government of Pakistan and our lawyers sit together and see how it goes. But I'll come back how to stop this violation. I think, yes, we must exhaust all diplomatic options, and we are trying our best to do that. In addition to that, I think we have to take a political decision, and that decision needs to comprise four components. The first component is that we need to permit the military to adopt a proactive and flexible response with little holds barred, deter future targetings of civil population, because that is our responsibility. We probably cannot do it across the line of control, but this side of the line of control, I think this is our responsibility. The second component is that we adopt a strategy of preemptive neutralization. When I talk of preemptive neutralization, I think the military understands it very well. Uh, it actually translates into knocking out deeper targets, the command and control centers of India from where these orders emanate, whether it is through the snipers or it is through the artillery fire, to knock them out. And well, some people might say that it may lead to escalation, but at times, to protect our people, we may have to accept the escalation as we did in February 2019. And let me also add to this is that, the people of Kashmir, the Prime Minister of Kashmir, on the 14th of November, he actually appealed to the government of Pakistan to save and protect them. So I think we have to take this issue and give a slightly, more leeway to our armed forces to stop this. Also, we have a slight, extended or enhanced liberty of action because of the change in the administration in the US. And here I would like to, refer to Ms. Kamala Harris. She said in October 2019 that we have to remind Kashmiris that they are not alone in the world and that there is a need, and if there is a need to intervene in the situations, we could do that. So again, that is a political sort of approach which needs to be continued. We have taken the issue to the OIC, and I think the foreign minister will be there shortly, and hopefully it will be discussed there also. We have taken the issue to the Security Council last year a number of times, and I think we need to continue our efforts on that. Uh, the threshold of the Pakistani government at the political level, I think it needs to be reduced to the ceasefire violations, as it was demonstrated in February 2019 when the Indians carried out their aggression at Balakot. And once that political direction is given, the armed forces, I think the Indian politico-military leaderships may be compelled to stop this violation.
All right. Now, we have also been joined in by Muhammad Ziauddin Saab, senior journalist, writer, columnist. Zia Saab, Assalamu alaikum.
Ji, Warun Salam.
Zia Saab, thank you so much for taking your time out and talking to us. I'm sure you must be following this story where a young man was martyred by the Indian sniper. And we have with us to talk about this particular issue, Asif Durrani Saab and Lieutenant General Mohammad Raza Khan Saab. And Raza Khan Saab just said that, we need to adopt a certain proactive approach. And he was mentioning about the war crimes of the Australian army that they committed in Afghanistan, where they were found guilty of killing civilians. Now, he mentioned about two very important things, morality and courage. Unfortunately, sir, these two elements seem to be missing in the Indian, I would say, military hub, sir. There seems to be no courage. They are it's very unfortunate that the coward military is targeting the civilians with assault weapons. And at the same time, when we talk about the morality, we do understand that this does not exist at all out there. Zia Saab, your take.
Well, what has happened is since the 5th August 2019, India has been unable to control the valley. And every day which passes, the problem in the valley has been increasing. And that their failure there has actually they wanted they're trying to justify the firing across the LOC in order to they are trying to divert the attention of the people of India from their failure in the valley towards they're trying to keep the LOC hot. And then also when they keep this LOC hot, this gives them a kind of a a proof to tell the world that look, what's happening in the occupied Kashmir, in our Kashmir, is because of the infiltration, and we want to stop the infiltration. That's the reason why we keep the LOC, hot. So that way, I mean, actually, their failure in to bring peace in the valley has actually forced them to keep this LOC hot. So and then this pressure on their border with China from the Chinese pressure is also perhaps creating problems for them. And I'm sure that a day will come very soon when they'll have to talk to Pakistan on the issue of at least the valley, if not Ladakh, at least the valley or Jammu. On the valley issue, they would have to come and talk to Pakistan. And when they come to Pakistan, I'm sure they'll come to Pakistan in a matter of, say, even 6 or 7 months, because they're not going to justify their hold on, the valley for long, and still be, taken by the world as if this is their own internal problem. Already, the new administration is coming, which is after the election in America. The approach of the new regime appears to be new administration appears to be rather more balanced rather than the way Trump was trying to resolve this problem by tilting towards India. Mm-hmm. So I think we must be prepared with a new policy. Our Kashmir policy, which is 73, almost 70-year-old, it also has to be. There must be some qualitative change in our approach. See, OIC, tomorrow there is a meeting of OIC foreign ministers, and Kashmir is not on the agenda. So we don't have support from even our Muslim countries, except for, of course, Iran and Turkey and Malaysia. But their voice is not so strong as that of the OIC. So we have to be very careful and bring about some qualitative change in our Kashmir policy. See, Kashmir has been a burden on Pakistan, whether one likes it or not. Both human because of the human sacrifices we have made, as well as the cost, the commercial cost of it. So we have to bring out a kind of a policy which would perhaps be almost similar to what Musharraf was trying to do, and give an idea to the Kashmiris that look, we are not interested in this, rather controlling Kashmir, but we would like to give you autonomy, both to our Kashmir as well as Indian Kashmir. I mean, that was the kind of the Manmohan Musharraf formula, 4-step formula. We could focus on that, and then as well as that, we could also try to.
There is another point. If you remember, when Yusuf Raza Gilani was the Prime Minister and Manmohan Singh was the Prime Minister of India, they had a meeting in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, and Pakistan did, present their own issues with the Indian Premier. And the moment he returned back to India, the way he was grilled, being the Prime Minister by the opposition parties in their parliament, I mean, it was unprecedented. And now we can see that there was a change in the regime. Modi took over, and there was an extremist mindset that is still prevailing out there. But just one more quick comment before I go to Ambassador Saab, and that is about the false narrative or concocted evidence and orchestration of false flag operations. This is what the narrative of the Indians unfortunately is, that they're trying to malign Pakistan. Now, do you believe that after that very important presser of the Foreign Minister and the DG ISP, General Iftikhar, about 12 days ago, in which they have presented, I would say, irrefutable proof to the entire globe. Do you think this is a reaction of the Indians in that regard, sir?
Yes, that is a reaction. See, actually, it's like they are whistling into the dark. This is the immediate reaction of India towards what our foreign offices try to do. Bring out evidence, concrete evidence of India's involvement in sabotaging and in terrorism actions in Pakistan by the Indian intelligence agencies. I mean, the proof is very, very, very concrete. So it was their reaction to it, immediate reaction, which I think is nothing more than that. But then I think the pressure on India from this valley, as well as the pressure on India from the Chinese, they don't want to, perhaps, it's already impacting on Indian economy, and they're not going to take it for long, and they would not like to have a two-front situation. They would definitely come to Pakistan for talks. When they come to Pakistan for talks, we must be prepared with something very concrete, something with a trade-off. I mean, we cannot win Kashmir on the conference table. The Indians would not rather offer their valley to us as a gift. We'll have to have some kind of a give and take kind of a solution for resolving it peacefully.
All right. Now, Ambassador Saab, when we talk about the change of regime in the United States of America, Joe Biden is the president-elect, will be taking over on the 20th of January, almost after 2 months or so. Kamala Harris is going to be the deputy out there as the vice president. Both have championed the cause of human rights, primarily Joe Biden. Do you think, sir, there's going to be some, I'm not saying that there's going to be a policy change by the Americans regarding this Kashmir issue, but do you think there would be some sort of indirect or direct pressure on the Indian authorities to cool down and at least start negotiating?
Yeah, I think so. Because as you have rightly said, President-elect Joe Biden and Vice President-elect Kamala Harris has been championing the cause of human rights elsewhere, but especially also on Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Correct. And they have also, during their election campaigns, they have been raising this issue, much to the chagrin of the Indians. And whenever these human rights issues have been raised, even during the previous Obama administration, it would raise the goosebumps among the Indian officials. So they see it as a red rag whenever human rights violations in the Indian occupied Kashmir are raised. So I think they will. But yes, as you have rightly said, the human rights issues, and for the American administration, especially when India and US have entered into a strategic partnership, they will raise it, but to an extent. They are not going to sabotage the strategic partnership with India, and especially at a situation when the Cold War with China is still there. Although President Biden is likely to give diplomacy a chance, and they are likely to raise the issues of environment and intellectual property rights. and of course other issues which they have been raising about China, about Hong Kong, about Taiwan. So they are going to discuss those issues, and also at the same time, Americans are also realizing that by putting some kind of sanctions on Chinese entities, actually they are shooting into their own feet. So Mr. Trump could take this step, but President-elect Joe Biden is likely to use diplomacy as a much wanted and as a much preferred tool to resolve disputes. So in that context, but at the same time, they would also want that India should be on the side of the U.S. And if you stretch the argument further, Indo-Pacific Alliance as well as Quad, which includes India, US, Japan, and Australia. So they have, in a way, given teeth to this alliance, and in a way, they want to put up this alliance against China. These are the realities, and these are sources of concern for China as well. But Indians are also mindful that they cannot challenge China. And they have recently seen during the military standoff what happened at the Galwan Valley, and where Indians have almost lost that occupied territory in Ladakh region. So, the stalemate is still there despite having more than 7-8 rounds of talks by the military commanders on both sides. So, in that respect, but at the same time, for India, it is a two-front situation. There's no doubt about that. And then it is not only two-front situation with regard to Pakistan and China, but also when you include the Kashmiris who are agitating in the occupied state, then I think Indian, especially strategists, they are also mindful of the fact, and they have been expressing their fears that in that respect, then India would be at a loss from all counts. So I think the situation is precarious for the Indians as well. Yes.
All right. General Raza Khan Saab, talking about diplomacy, talking about giving a chance to diplomacy, that sounds really great. But there's a question for you. When we talk about Quad, Australia, Japan, India, and USA, talk about the Indo-Pacific strategy of the Americans, and then we end up hearing that the Chinese have signed a contract with most of these countries of Quad, other than India, into it, and other than USA. Primarily, I think this was the deal of the century in terms of trade and commerce. My question is here, sir, that on one side, you see some of those countries, including Australia and Japan, as adversaries of China in the form of Quad. But at the same time, they are partners in trade and commerce. So do you think these two parallel concepts can work together, sir?
A very brief answer to that is, I would say it's very difficult. I think they may continue to be antagonistic. They may continue, to try and contain China economically or even militarily. But I think China is way ahead from all of them, and I think they might fail in their endeavor. But let me come back to what was said previously. I think if Kashmir is, first of all, I don't think that Kashmir is a burden on Pakistan. It is not a burden. Kashmir is there. We have a stated position on that, and that position is that it has to be resolved in accordance with the United Nations Security Council resolution. Right now, I think it is a much bigger burden on India. I would say 10 times bigger burden on India because of the decisions that the Indian government has taken, and because of which Kashmiris across the political divide, they have united, whether they are in the Indian occupied Jammu or Kashmir or they are abroad. I'm talking of the Kashmiri diaspora. They are not prepared, to live with the Indians. They don't want to be called Indians. And even the pro-Kashmiri leaders, have on one or two occasions said, and I think that was reflected in one of your programs, that they would be prepared, to be Chinese subjects than to be Indian subjects. So also let me tell you, that the $70 billion of the Indian budget that they are spending every year on their defense, I think more than half of that is committed to Kashmir. And it has been said by, I think, very prominent international leaders like the German Chancellor that the Indian position is not tenable. And therefore, I think it is the Indians who should now be coming and asking for talks with us. And once they do that, then the Pakistani position should be very clear that we want a resolution of this issue, a peaceful resolution through the UN Security Council. Also, let me add that the Kashmir issue is an issue now between among three nuclear powers, and when we include Ladakh in it, then I think we cannot apply any other formula than the United Nations Security Council resolutions, which very recently was endorsed by the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Chinese government as well. Finally, I think I would like to salute the spirit of the people of Kashmir, whether they are on this side of the line of control or across the line of control, that despite the barbarities that are being perpetrated on them, they still want to join Pakistan, and whenever they are martyred, then they are buried in Pakistani flags. So I think they are still in high spirits, and I think the government of Pakistan needs to continue its policy, principled policy, to support them in the political, diplomatic, and I would say even to openly now support them by some kind of a Kashmir fund, which would be put across for awareness and understanding of the issue of Kashmir, for peace in the subcontinent. Also, we need to know and convey to the United States that the issue of Kashmir's resolution is directly related to peace in Afghanistan, because it divides the attention of Pakistan. And the earlier this is resolved, the better it would be for the resolution of the resolution of the issues in Afghanistan and the success of the peace process in Afghanistan.
All right, Jalsa, one more quick comment before I go to Zia Saab, and that is, you mentioned that the greater amount of their defense budget is being spent in Kashmir, and now there is another front, that is Ladakh. Talking about minus 30, minus 40 degrees temperature out there. Their forces are not used to, operating and living out there in those conditions. But having said that, now the budget is going to multiply further. Do you think, sir, that is the right approach, right strategy to squeeze them step by step? And under the given circumstances where corona is just multiplying like anything, it's like a wildfire in India, and the kind of economic problems they are facing or will face in the future because of the current corona issue. Look at their growth rate, the way it has gone down, and so on and so forth. And people are sick and tired of this, all this what they are witnessing, which they have never witnessed before. This extremism, anti-Muslim sentiment, anti-minority sentiments primarily, and anti-Pakistan too. Sir, how long do you think India can sustain?
I think it is going to be very, very difficult. They created these hurdles themselves, and probably they are repenting it there. I was recently reading that the Indian force is about 2 to 3 lakhs of them, who have now been freshly, deployed in East Ladakh. They are living in tents, and while their army and their Ministry of Defense is making efforts to airlift some kind of temporary habitat for that. But that is, and this is going to be permanent now. That is not the case, I think, in the case of China, which have, I believe, now laid fiber optics, and they have almost completed their habitat just across. So I think this is going to cost them a lot. And I think the Indian government and the people of India the Indian media needs to realize that these have been strategic blunders which the Modi government made, and this had made India much more insecure, whether it is militarily or whether it is economically. And therefore, if they reverse this policy, I think it will be in the Indian interest and also in the interest of peace in the subcontinent and in South Asia.
All right. Now, Zia Saab,
Ji.
the important, would you like to respond to Jal Saab?
Well, see, actually, we better simplify the Kashmir issue. Let's not make it a very complicated matter. Start with, take Gilgit-Baltistan. It was never under the Dogra. When the partition took place, part of it has already been leased to the British government, and part of it was already, has been declared. I mean, a freedom movement was going on, and the Dogra's army was thrown out of Gilgit-Baltistan. So it is not a disputed area. So we can easily make it a fifth promise of Pakistan without having to worry about UN resolutions. Then come to Kashmir. The valley is the most important thing for us. As far as Ladakh is concerned, well, it is being taken care of with the Chinese. In any case, it is the Buddhists and Buddhists are the majority there. And then Jammu is a Hindu majority area. So we must concentrate on the valley, and to make the Indians, understand that there is a solution for this. We could, as I said, do a give and take kind of a arrangement. Okay, let's make even our Kashmir into a disputed territory, so that the entire Kashmir valley as well as our Kashmir becomes internationally a disputed territory. That's alone that. And then we sit together with the Indians and try to find out a solution which is based on give and take. See, the Indians will never agree to a plebiscite. This is a loss. We will keep on talking about plebiscite. We will keep on talking about United Nations resolutions, and nothing will happen out of it. See what has happened. Finally, they have revoked the 370 and they have revoked the 35A. Now yes, they have brought the problem. The problems have increased for Indians, but the Kashmir issue has been qualitatively changed. This is no more the issue which was there at the United Nations table. It's a completely changed situation. So we have to be prepared to a solution which India would agree. India is not going to offer us on a platter what they have already won. So you have to be very sensible about it.
So can I very quickly add to this is that the Indian position on that is very clear, and they want the Azad Jammu and Kashmir also to that, and that is their final position. So for us now, to say that UN resolutions on Kashmir should not be pursued, I think that may not be the right decision, and I think it is also the people of Pakistan. They would actually want that our position should not be lower than what it has been, and that is a plebiscite through the UN resolutions. And my view on that is that with the Indian decisions, about Kashmir, that decision has made the Indian position much more weaker, and Pakistani position is must strengthen, and we must not come down from that position.
Now, General Saab, during the Corps Commanders Conference, this issue of Kashmir was pretty hot, and top commanders voiced concern over the Indian terrorism primarily, and unfortunately, because they have a very strong media and the way they project their concepts and their ideologies and the kind of mindset they have through the Western media in particular, it seems as if we are the culprits and Indian who are the actual culprits. They always, interestingly, there's no check on them. They always go unhurt and free.
Yes, let me very quickly quote, from the Obama's memoirs. Our media has been projecting the reaction of our civil and military leadership to the killing of OBL. But what they actually missed two other important components. And the first one was that Obama said that the United States could not afford to look soft on terrorism. And I think the people of Pakistan and the government of Pakistan also needs to realize this, that we cannot afford to look soft on terrorism. The status quo, again, for that, on the issue of terrorism is untenable for us. And therefore, I think we have to revise our strategy on that and react in the manner in which we reacted to the Indian aggression in February 2019. And also with this, let me add that if war is a continuation of policy by other means, then terrorism in any form is war by other means too, and therefore politics. And it becomes the responsibility of the political leadership, to give a political direction, which is a bold political direction, to all the state institutions, including the armed forces of Pakistan, so that the Indian terrorism in all its forms and manifestations can be defeated, whether it is against the CPEC or whether it is in Balochistan or other parts of Pakistan. So we have to make a resolve that we can no more afford to be soft on terrorism, and whether it is at the political level, the diplomatic level, or at the level of our response by our military instrument, I think it needs to be revised so that we can defeat this terrorism campaign, the state-sponsored terrorism by India against Pakistan.
All right. Last closing remarks, Ambassador Saab.
Well, I think let's continue the fight at the diplomatic level. And of course, war is always an option. So that we can do ultimately. And in that respect, let the Indians chew in their own juice. So we will have the time. And I think we'll have the last laugh. Thank you.
All right, Ambassador Saab, it was a pleasure having you. Thank you so much. Jail Saab, thank you so much for your participation. And Zia Saab, it's always good to have you. And that's all we have for this hour. I'll see you, inshallah, next week. Till then, you take good care. Khuda Hafiz.